If you could all start taking your seats, we are going to kick off the next session. Welcome to the second keynote of ITW 2022. My name is Annabelle Helm. I am the director of the ITW Global Leaders Forum and the GLF Community. Before we open the session, I just need to do a bit of housekeeping. I'd like to extend a huge thank you to our diamond sponsors, AT&T, Deutsche Telekom, STC, and Telefonica Global Solutions. I may seem familiar to some of those in the audience, as I used to be part of this industry. I've had an 8-year hiatus at the GSMA, and I am incredibly excited to be back part of the international communications industry. I know that there is a lot of excitement on the show floor. People are extremely happy to be back in person, and I echo those sentiments. I am delighted to be joined today by 4 members of our GLF community as we tackle today's topic, which is all about looking at the future, capitalizing on growth opportunities. Before I invite them on stage, I would like to take this opportunity to make 2 key announcements. Firstly, as you may have seen from the front cover of today's ITW Daily, the GLF board members have elected a new chair of the board, Elisabetta Romano, the CEO of Sparkle. She will be joining me on stage shortly. I'd like to extend a huge thank you to Lorinda Pang of Lumen, our outgoing chair, for the part she has played guiding the industry over the last 2 years. And on behalf of the GLF community, a very warm welcome to Elisabetta. Under her leadership, we can only continue to go from strength to strength. And I, for one, am extremely excited about the possibilities of what we can deliver for the industry in a collaborative platform. Perfect. Right. Secondly, today, and Eric stole my thunder a little bit on this, we have just launched the 3rd annual DIB report, Diversity, Inclusion and Belonging. The first looked at gender, last year's was racial equity, and this year we're focusing much more on inclusion. Given the increasing competition for talent, it is more important than ever that as an industry we are inclusive. You know, diversity is being invited to the table, inclusion is having a voice, and belonging is having that voice being heard. So I invite all of you to log on to our website, download it, share it, and read the interventions. Right. So without further ado, I am going to move on to explain a little bit about us. This is the GLF community. For those who don't know us, we have 70 members and growing. We are governed by a board, and these are the members who sit on the board. Every year we do a pulse survey. Some of those results are going to inform and frame the conversations today, and all of the board members contributed to those results. So, on to the main event. Firstly, we've had a little change in today's speaker lineup. Unfortunately, Oliver Kampler-Warner cannot be with us. He sends his heartfelt apologies, but he also sends an amazing replacement speaker, Noah Drake, who was very recently announced as the President and Managing Director of Telstra America. Thank you. Right, so if I'd like to invite the speakers on stage, they need little introduction, but I'm going to do it anyway. Martijn Blanken, CEO of EXA Infrastructure. Alexandra Pebbero, CEO of Ibasis. Elisabetta Romano, CEO of Sparkle and our newest chair of the ITW GLF. And Noah Drake, President and Managing Director of Telstra America. If you guys would all like to join me on stage. Okay, welcome everyone. Thank you for accepting my invitation to join the keynote today. We're going to drive straight in. So just to frame the conversation a little bit, and we've heard this in the previous keynote today, through COVID-19, digital infrastructure providers have played a critical role in keeping the world connected. Never in recent history has the industry had such a high public profile, such positive sentiment. Investment in digital infrastructure has accelerated. Enterprise digital transformation has gone into hyperdrive, and quality connectivity has never been more critical. A recent survey of the ITW GLF board shows that the industry is at its most optimistic since 2017, with 83% of our members targeted on growth rather than margin improvement or cost reduction. So let's kick off capitalizing on this sense of optimism. You know, Martijn, do you share this sense of optimism, and what's kind of getting you going at the moment?
Yeah, I do share the sense of optimism. Firstly, because of the external dynamics, the demand for bandwidth continued to grow, so it's quite a good thing to operate and work in an industry that has an ever-growing demand, and we can't see it taper off. But also the industry dynamics start to change. I think what we're seeing is that the industry starts to split up into smaller pieces, where each individual piece starts to focus a bit more on something and become very, very good at it. I think the days of the players who did everything for everyone are going to be over, and with that focus, you see players emerge who are becoming really, really good at that and actually start to make money. Whereas in the past, it was a bit more difficult to achieve that.
Alexandre, same question. Are you feeling optimistic, and why?
Microphone.
And yes.
Yeah, the mic is there. Thank you. Do you hear me? Yeah. Great. Yeah, the optimism, of course. I mean, I feel so good after 2 years without seeing each other. 2 years during which we kept the world connected. Seeing the digitization speeding up, and we're like, following the path, taking the opportunity to pivot to new products, to new customers, but at the same time, we couldn't see each other, couldn't see the customers, couldn't catch up on the growth. So now, after 2 years, it's really the opportunity, we feel the opportunity, especially with this event, to catch up and do all the business thing we wanted to do for the past 2 years. So we feel that, now is the time for signing big contracts, big time.
Elisabetta, how about you?
Yes. So the optimism in a very simple way, so it's coming from the fact that these years of COVID, of pandemic, has shown to everyone, the relevance of our industry. I think that so every person on the earth has had the need to connect, for work, the children, for the school. So I think that the awareness of the importance and the relevance of what we do we knew very well, we that were in the industry, but was not so clear. So now, that is done. So everyone understands that connectivity is really important, is a basic need for this digital life. Now, it's up to us to step up and leverage on the fact that the awareness is there, and trying to, get more what we deserve. That is, of course, going more on the profit growth that I see on the screen. So we are very sensitive to it. So we are relevant, so we need to get that profit growth that we see there.
Noah, same question.
Yeah. Well, first of all, how exciting is it that we can talk about growth? I mean, it feels like in the last few years, it's been a lot about savings, reduction, things like that, really transforming ourselves in order to be able to meet the needs and demands of our customers in the industry. So just being able to talk about growth is incredibly exciting to us at Telstra. In particular, just feeling the energy here at the conference and the people that are out. And it didn't look like it did 3 years ago or 2 years ago when it was, when we last kind of came out in mass, right? I mean, the cross-section of people being represented here, it's starting to change. And from a talent perspective, whether that's early career entrants, whether that's a a wider cross-section of diversity and backgrounds. All of those types of things from a talent perspective are incredibly encouraging to see. So we're gonna take that, we're gonna harness it, we're gonna couple it with a few other things that we're gonna talk about a bit, and try to just be a better version of ourselves in the future.
Perfect. And Elisabetta just touched on this a little bit. So we just restated our purpose. How do we prolong the long tail impact, of the great reputation, the ride that we've been on over the last couple of years? How do we translate that into leading with purpose and business benefits? So no, I'm going to throw that back to you.
Me?
Yes. Well, Elisabetta, you go for it.
Go ahead. No.
Go you.
Okay. Yeah. So are you talking about harnessing the impact of the new kind of talent that we're seeing?
Well, either way, right? So leading with purpose, we've restated our purpose. We're riding high. How do we translate that into growth, and what do we do from there?
Yeah, absolutely. So now is the time to capitalize on that, right? We're kind of emerging from this slumber, if you will, but it really wasn't a slumber because a lot of things were happening behind the scenes. We had to figure out a way to adapt, and I think a lot of the lessons that we learned as an organization are lessons that our customers can benefit from, particularly in terms of recruiting and retaining top talent. I feel like I wouldn't have the opportunity that I do today to even sit on this panel if Telstra wasn't committed to growing and curating the right talent for the future. So I'm incredibly grateful for that, even on a personal level. This is something that we want to do programmatically across Telstra Americas, and then even wider across Telstra International, is just harnessing the power and the innovation that's really coming out of the university system. But to do that, you have to be pertinent, you have to be relevant, right? And so you think, I listened to Carrie talk a little bit before this panel, and she talked about the universities, and that's really it's almost heartbreaking to hear an answer like that. That's something that we should feel almost just an innate sense, almost a passionate sense inside of us to change, right? And so here at Telstra, that's something that we're absolutely committed to, and something that we're focused on 100%.
Elizabeth?
Yes, so I think that to capitalize on what we have it and what the people understand and how we have it, we need to do some work. So we need to some homework to do it, and it's there is a clear 3 pillars in my understanding. So the first one is technology. I think that technology needs to get back at the center of what we do it, because our industry has been always so technology focused. So we need to, so much is happening from a technology side. We need to go back there and really leverage on the technology, especially now that even our customers are disrupted from a technology. Then there is a business transformation. We need to become much easier to work with. So it's quite famous that, for decades we've been a bit the elephant, so a bit slow, not so easy to work with. So we need to do this. So now it's, time is running out, because now we have the opportunity, so we must do it. And last but not least is the operational transformation. I think that Emmanuel before was talking about it. So again, that is how we improve ourselves, all our internal process, whatever we do it. So now there is so much new technology that we should leverage, but we need to work to change processes and culture, and of course, people and talent are very relevant from this perspective.
Perfect. So GLF members see the greatest opportunity for value creation here in enterprise digital transformation, softwareization, and network as a service. And apologies to those in the audience. I know you can't exactly see what's at the bottom, but I can share slides afterwards. Martijn, as an industry, what do you think we need to do to realize the value and avoid missed opportunities?
Let's start by just making a very cold observation. If you look at the total shareholder return over the last 10 years that this industry, the telecommunication industry, has achieved, it is abysmal. It's outright abysmal, despite the fact that there have been trillions of dollars being invested in telecommunication infrastructures. So there's a lot of value has been created, but the industry has been absolutely horrible in retaining any of that value. It has leaked to almost every other industry but the telecommunications industry. So we can talk and have a lofty conversation about purpose and growth, but ultimately it also is about making sure that you generate a proper return on the investments made. And that starts with starting to make substantial investments and be really focused on those. And I think one of the challenges that you see in the industry, and Alexandra would probably second me on this, is that the traditional players have historically had a role to play for the smallest consumer all the way to the largest enterprise and the wholesale market across a very broad spectrum of products and services, across a very broad spectrum of technologies. And in my view, it's just simply impossible to be that good at everything at the same time. So you will see an emergence of specialist players like iBasis, for example, and Alexander, maybe you can build on this, or in our case, XI Infrastructure, who focus on a small subset in the industry, but do that really, really well, and have the capital behind it to invest in it. Because without the capital and without the willingness and the courage to invest, there is not going to be any meaningful growth, let alone shareholder value creation. Or there will be value for the end users, for the consumers, but the investors make not any money of it.
Alexandre, would you like to
Completely to your point, Martin, totally agree, and thank you. I take the relay because, as Elizabeth has said, this was an industry of elephant, and typically now we have moved to carving out business, so they are on a standalone basis, independent, and we can go at our own speed. With EXA, Martin is doing a fantastic job at the infrastructure level, having the infrastructure dancing. We do the same at the voice and messaging level on IoT. And in the past 2 years, we took advantage of the situation, since we couldn't meet the customers, to make acquisitions. And now iBasis, for instance, we are 40% in mobile data and messaging. We bought a messaging platform from Nosh. We bought a customer management platform, Symphony, in IoT. And so it's 10%. So you see now our business is 50% non-voice, and it is growing. Of course, voice is very good, and we'll come back to it, but that's really what is changing. Once the elephant is set free, we can dance very quickly and do fantastic things for the customers and for the industry, obviously.
Perfect. So building on that, Elisabetta, to what extent do carriers need operating model transformation, in order to capture this value or retain the value within what we do?
Yeah, so that's why is important this operational transformation is because, again, the people around us, if are consumers or enterprise, they are interacting in a different way. They are buying and consuming product in a different way. So they have been changing a lot. And at the end, we do this job. So we do it for consumers, for enterprise, for the people. And so cannot be that all the world around us has been changing the way they do things, and we operating just in the same way like in the past. So it's very difficult. So there is so much leapfrog that has happened on that perspective. So I think that we must do it. So when we talk about operational transformation, what do we mean? So of course there are different dimensions. So one dimension is the automation of all north-south interfaces. So that is important. So automation and having systems, IT systems that help us, because I don't know what about most of the people, but for sure in Sparkle, and I know also some other companies in the same field, we still have a lot of manual activities we do it, and that's not good. That's not good. So one thing is automation north-south. Another extremely important thing is becoming really a data-driven company. Telco industry that has quantity of data. So we are one of the industry, each one of us, that has so much data. And we are the last industry to leverage on the data. So I still remember an anecdote of a guy that was coming from NASDAQ, and joined telco operators in Sweden as a CTO. And when I met him the first time, he says, I'm shocked on how little telco operators are using the data they have it. That's, there is so many reasons to do it. So data-driven is so important. And last but not least is the dream of each one of us to have autonomous networks. So network that, if we think now about how we operate the network, and if we think about assurance, we are still reactive. We should go to reactive to proactive, from proactive to predictive, till to the autonomous network. I mean, we are talking about this since probably more than a decade. Of course, there is a call for action also for tech company, because if we go around and we ask, about solution, who can work with us to do this? There are not too many people, to be honest, that are, providing solution in this field. So, but these are really the three pillars for me that are fundamental in the operational transformation.
Noah, how's Telstra thinking about this?
Yeah, I think Elisabetta hit the nail on the head with a lot of those points that she made. The one that I would add is proximity to the customer. So at Telstra, we realized that we needed to radically transform our organization to become closer to the customer, and we did that through things like regionalization, right? We need to be in the field with our customers as much as possible, understanding the voice of the customer, and that's kind of the expectation they have. Know what they do, right? It's not just a matter of farming services now, like a utility company. We need to radically understand what are our customers trying to achieve, and then how can we help them achieve that? And if we don't understand that, then honestly, it's not really worth their time to even have a conversation with us. And so, in order to be able to facilitate that, we needed to change our operating model and organize around that. But the piece about digital transformation, particularly with automation, some of the things that we need to do in-house that we've seen in the industry using data, I mean, those are huge. And if we can't catch up to those, we are going to become irrelevant. So definitely love that point.
And Alexandre, can you build on this? What's next for voice,
For voice, voice is almost dead, but not quite.
Almost, but not quite.
Not quite. It's still a 10 billion euro market worldwide. We still connect the whole planet, as we all know. And it is a product which is more and more complex to manage. So together as an industry, and especially within iBasis, we are very good at managing that complexity, and managing that complexity for customers, large telcos that do not have the time nor the resource to manage such a complexity, but which are the benefactors of that complexity. Let's take an example, the origin-based routing. We change now the pricing if a minute is coming from the Netherlands toward France or from Morocco toward France. Not the same price. We did the same last year in UK, changing the price, depending where the minute is coming from. It's awfully complex, as you can imagine, but it generates so much money for the English operators, you just cannot believe it. Well, we all believe it because we all know it. Okay, that's the way we generate more value for the telcos, so that indeed voice is still alive. The second thing we are doing in voice, the way we are prolonging that product, is that during the pandemic, we had to pivot our product toward the digital players and integrate voice application into Teams and Zoom. That generated a new source of revenue for us, okay? And we are, of course, continuing on that path. Last, of course, we continue the consolidation of players, and you have seen some of them already. You will see, of course, more going forward. And to give you an idea and to conclude about the future of voice, is that when we talk about consolidation, last quarter, Sinch, completely new player, right, bought Intelliquent, a completely voice domestic player, US domestic, for $1.1 billion. Not quite.
Okay, right. So moving on to investment, looking at this. So from a GLF perspective, the priority for CapEx allocation is new service development, network expansion. Martijn, we have to start with you on this. How are you thinking about CapEx allocation?
Look, it really depends on the role that you play in the industry, right? So for the infrastructure players like ourselves, who invest mainly in the layer one, say layer two of the networks, it's a lot about duct acquisition, fiber pulling, and building ILA cabins and lighting as many fibers as possible. So a lot of the capital that we invest goes into physical infrastructure. I think Mark Helpfinger is going to be talking later today. He works in an organization a bit like Elizabeth does, where the capital is not as abundant as it is for some private equity-backed funds. So he's moving very understandably more into the software orchestration layer and to facilitate various services to be provided elsewhere, everywhere in the world. So he is going to a much more CapEx light model and building IP by literally writing the software himself. And you see more people doing that, including Elisabetta. So it really depends a little bit on what the role it is that you play in the industry. Is it at an infrastructure level, at a platform level, or at the service level? I'm repeating the point I made earlier. I think it will be pretty difficult to be very good at all three of them at the same time. So you will see a specialization at those various layers.
Elisabetta, you've been teed up to add to this.
Yes, so I think that, of course, we are very conscious on the money that we spend. That is given for granted, but I would say that the network expansion and upgrading is definitely where we invest our CapEx, because we have asset, we have infrastructure, we need to be sure that are always at the cutting edge, and that we can have capacity where is needed. And in the last years, we saw how much capacity request there was. Then some money when it comes to new products. I firmly believe that focus is important. So Martin was saying, not everyone can do everything. I'm on the same page. But there are some new products that is very much important for the work we do, like SD-WAN and like, for example, IoT as a platform. And then we have OSS, BSS, so all the internal systems, because when we talk about the automation, the operational transformation we were talking before, or the business transformation to become easier to work with, then all the OSS, BSS, and ERP systems are crucial. But in our case, we are at the final stage of the transformation. And just but very little money for innovation, but we need to, keep understanding what's new.
Right, and I think just to build on what you said here, when we released these results, there was a discussion around why internal system upgrades wasn't a priority, right? Given that automation is what we're driving for. And I think it's because that new service development plus the OSS, BSS automation piece, it's one and the same in certain respects, right?
Exactly.
So just to put that straight, and Noah, how's kind of Telstra thinking about this? Where are you allocating CapEx?
So the first thing I'll say really quick before I touch on that is the specialization piece is important, but we still need to provide a holistic offering to the market, right? Which kind of begs the question, well, how do we go about that? And I think partnership is really important. So if we're going to specialize, if we're going to kind of all have these areas of focus where we're going to be really good, we need to be able to partner with one another as well to be effective to serve the industry. In terms of CapEx, Telstra is really looking at areas of growth, and that's where we're prioritizing our CapEx. So you look at expanding from Asia to kind of Asia-Pac, particularly with Digicel and the acquisition that we recently announced there, serving our customer base in that area, as well as underserved regions, right, that didn't traditionally have access to fixed connectivity. So that's really important to us. Emerging markets, and then within Australia, you probably heard the announcement of just the investment in the national network that we're building, the dark fiber. It's a completely new route, diverse route, right? And we see the opportunity there to serve both kind of customers that, again, are underserved, but also to provide that new technology that enables some of this transformation. Because ultimately, the core connectivity remains the same, the base layer. So we need to find ways to build off that, but we also need to make sure that that layer is refreshed. Martin is doing just that, right? So there's definitely a play there as well.
And Alexandre, so given the focus on softwareization, how is that reflected in your own strategy in iBasis?
For us, definitely in terms of CapEx, automation, softwareization, and all regarding the customer management is the priority for us. And that's we have developed within iBasis. If we have hired talents, so that we can indeed develop ourselves, our own software, and so that we could do that for our customers, but also to do it for ourselves. I mean, it's very important, as I think we all share that we drink our own champagne before offering to others. And last, in the new service area, the CPaaS part is really critical, and that's really where we see, in terms of investment, what we can do differently. And I see with our last acquisition, this customer management platform, it's really where the telcos can make the last mile, so that the connectivity that we are offering is accessible to the customers. We were hosting yesterday the GLF people from the digital industry, on what they were asking mainly is, please make it easy, make yourself easy to use. That's where we are really dedicating our CapEx to.
So the industry is seeing an influx of private capital, right? How do we strengthen our equity story? Martin, you've seen this from many different areas with lots of different hats. How do you think we can strengthen our equity story?
We can, sorry,
Strengthen our equity story.
Yeah, look, it's with the fiber to the home rollouts and the 5G rollouts and the facilitation of the move of workloads into cloud environments, all happening at the same time. An enormous amount of capital is required. And the vast majority of the existing players are listed telcos whose CEO worry about, first, can I pay my debt? Secondly, can I pay my dividend to my shareholders? And then thirdly, what's left I can invest. And that is never enough to facilitate all that. So the only way to fund the investments that are required to meet the demands that we spoke about is with the influx of alternative capital sources. Debt is not really an option for most listed companies, so then you come down to private equity. And you have seen the influx of private equity in almost every region around the globe. And it started very simply with the passive infrastructure like towers, mobile towers, and just the passive fiber, but they're moving up the stack now, and they're getting more and more active in the infrastructure and the platforms and even the services. So I think that trend will continue for the next couple of years, and the carriers, the existing players, will have to make a choice where they are actually going to excel and where they stop playing. Because one thing is clear, they cannot continue to do it what they have been doing over the last few years.
Elizabeth, would you like to build on that?
Yes, so I think that in our industry we saw too much, not so probably, yes, my expression is correct, private equity entering into the field, because then of course you need to have industrial player that work on it. So I think that what we will see is a consolidation. I think that consolidation will happen because so probably the segmentation that Martin is referring to as well. So because probably we will see less and less full integrated service provider, but for the simple reason that I'm in the telco since many years, at least 3 decades. So, but if you think about 15 years ago, probably, a bit more than 15 years ago, the main service of a service provider was voice. So all was about one product, was the voice. And the voice was very much embedded in the infrastructure. You shouldn't do too much. Now, if you think about a service provider, okay, is consumer, is enterprise, there is voice, there is SMS, there is all the data, there is cloud, there is IoT. So now there is so many products and services that you have to offer, and then so many different segment targets. So probably the things is becoming very complicated. So I think that on one side we will see more specialized player, like Martin was saying, but on the other side we will see a consolidation of players because, I mean, if we think about Europe, there are too many players, so probably that's what we'll see. Now we see private equity fund, but probably, you know, there will be more operators that will come together.
That single button for the hyperscalers to push,
Yes.
right? So I'm going to move on. We've talked about opportunities, we've talked about growth. Let's talk a little bit about the risk here. So, within the GLF, we identified hyperscalers and geopolitics as the greatest area of risk. But, it's also an opportunity, right? Risk, change, whatever. Elisabetta, how are you looking at the impact of hyperscalers on our industry?
Yeah, so first of all, the definition of hyperscaler is becoming a wider terms. So let's say that what we were called OTT, they're now a hyperscaler, the Google, the Amazon, the Meta of the world. I think that I see very well the collaboration with them. For years, before to join Telecom Italia and Sparkle, I was in a tech company, a Swedish tech company, and we were very much afraid about OTT because at that time we thought, okay, I mean, they are coming, they are, eating at the lunch of every one of us and so on. Now I think we are at the stage where we understand that OTT hyperscaler do not want to do our job because it's a tough job. Alexandra, coming to you, that we are able to manage complex situations, that, they are fine with the software and they let us do our job. So there is a full collaboration. We are at the step where they at a certain point have been forced to build infrastructure like subsea cable just because we were not able to give them the capacity they needed. So they've been forced to do it. But I think, there is a collaboration. And so for example, in the case of a company I'm leading, we work with them, with some of them also on very innovative and tech for good projects. So I would say that it's full. Then within hyperscaler, there are maybe other players that are, a bit on competition sides, but, I like to focus on the good one.
No, what about you? Are you focusing on the good?
Absolutely. So it's certainly important to acknowledge the impact that the hyperscalers have on our environment, but it's also equally important to acknowledge, the lane that they're looking to stay in. And I think that that's a really good point because you really have three options, right? You have a build, a buy, or a partner. And so if those other, when you don't have the investment coming in from the telco side and it's not adequate to serve the needs of the business, and you can't partner and you can't buy, then you kind of have to build, right? And so that's creating maybe some of the dynamic that we're experiencing. So if we have the infrastructure to support the needs, it becomes more of a partnership conversation, and that's really where we're trying to steer it. And we feel optimistic about that for the future. But it's important that we look in the mirror and understand the kind of current environment that we're in so that we can operate around it.
Okay, so Martijn, over recent years, we've seen geopolitics having an increasingly destabilizing impact on telecoms. We've disrupted the supply chain. We are trying to keep the world connected in an increasingly difficult environment. How are you looking at this from EXA? Is it changed the way that you're doing business?
Look, not more generically speaking, not so much from EXA. Clearly, the changes at the global geopolitical landscape have an impact on the industry. And look what happened in the submarine industry in the Pacific, where literally billions of dollars were invested that are de facto stranded investments because they could not go live because China and the US no longer agreeing. So it has had an impact on the industry, and it will continue to have an impact on the industry. It says geopolitics. I think at a political level, it's equally interesting to see. Look, if you look at even at a national level, everyone thinks it is completely normal that there's only one rail line operator, not the train operators, but the people who operate the rail, at least on one stretch. Yet in telecoms, there are, in most countries, 3, sometimes 4 parties who operate mobile networks. That makes economically no sense at all. Yet the politics will not allow a further consolidation at an infrastructure level. So you get very poor returns on your investments. And I think the politicians have to get over and have to start looking at the industry in a completely different way. Add to that in Europe, where they see the spectrum auctions as a form of a hidden tax, where in Korea or Japan, it's a beauty contest. You don't have to pay for the spectrum; they give it to you, providing that you can deliver value to the economy. The Europeans and also the Americans, and in many other countries, they see it to squeeze a few extra dollars or euros out of the industry. So I think the geopolitics is one thing. I want to add the angle of the sort of the normal the politics. They need to start looking at the industry in a completely different way if they want to allow this industry to flourish. And I'm seeing that Europe, where they had a lead in 2010 in 3G, they're a backwater. What Asia is doing, Europe has been surpassed, and even also the United States. The quality of the mobile networks here in this country and in Europe are abysmal compared to what you see in Asia. It's just a different way of a nation looking at the importance of additional infrastructure. So yeah, it's there's a lot of work to do there.
Absolutely, and difficult for us, right? It's baked into our DNA to be interoperable, to be interconnected, and it's uncomfortable for us.
But I think it's a role for us collectively to educate the politicians better on what the importance is of a well-functioning digital infrastructure and the service that provided over it. And it's no longer nice to have, it's not even need to have. If it doesn't exist, the whole economy will fall to pieces. And I don't think that many politicians fully appreciate the complexity of that and the role they have to play in it.
So it would be remiss of us as representatives of the GLF to not talk about areas for collaboration and opportunities of where we can work together as an industry. You know, we're probably not going to solve geopolitics, but Alexandra, would you like to?
No, just to complete, because I feel it's a very important point, because that's typically why the GLF exists and why, as an industry, we exist. Right. Indeed, our politicians, the advantage they have is that we have voted for them, and I think we want to keep that alive. And it's great that we have the opportunity to educate them, because this way, at least, we have someone listening to us. I think it's very important what Martin just said, not only about the politics, but also about the fact that EXA now exists, is that we are in a free market economy where, because the telcos couldn't get money on the stock market, but because we needed money to innovate and to expand, we were able to find through private equity, infrastructure funds, the money needed to indeed get to be flush of money and invest in infrastructure, invest in towers, invest in subsea cables, invest in many, many things in this industry. I think it's really important to show and to remind that it is here in this show that it all started 10 years ago when we decided to leave Washington, D.C., decided to go to Chicago, but we made another decision also as a community of network. We said that to the OTTs at the time, it was time for them to pay for the infrastructure they were using. We decided that we were creating a lot of value with infrastructure. You know, they had a free ride. They were not paying, if you remember, they were not paying for the cables, they were not paying for the terrestrial infrastructure. It is among other places, in this instance, the GLF at the time, that we said as a community, it is time for this community to get paid for the value created with our infrastructure. We are 10 years later, back in DC with pleasure, but also now with all of the OTTs being our customer. Now they are paying our services, and we can sell them more services, as we have shown and demonstrated.
And that's a perfect segue because we spent a lot of time talking about value creation yesterday. How do we do this? Elizabeth, where should we be placing our bets? You know, what do we do together to drive that value?
Yeah, so I think that first of all, we need to be very clear on all uniqueness we have it. And we have really to make it evident and to leverage on it, because too many times we have thought that something was unique for us, but then we have not been able, to get the right value out of it. So first of all, we need to be clear. So what is unique from us? Yesterday, when we had during our GLF session, there was external speakers, so from the hyperscaler OTT world, coming to us and telling us, we need you, we need you, we need to see you, as a global, ubiquitous network. So because it's so important, who is the application developer community, needs to leverage on what you have it, but in an easy way. So the relevance is there. Everyone is recognizing it. We need to, spell it out a bit better on our case. So what is the uniqueness we have it, and being extremely fast to do the changes we have to do it. So that's really, how we, use technology to do the business transformation and operational transformation. This is extremely key. Of course, there are some challenges, and the talent is one of the challenges. So they spoke before at the panel. You were speaking about it, because we need to have, new competence, new blood in the company in order to, leverage the new technology and transform. So that's, and we need to work on it. But I think that, so there is one thing that is important, is that when COVID came, I think that all of our company in 2 weeks remotized what we thought would have never been able to remotize. I was a CTO in Telecoms, and there was things that says, no, that will never be remote. In 15 days, we did it in 15 days. I think that we were the industry at best to react at what the pandemic was bringing to us. So that's showing us that we focus, we can make it. And it's time to make this transformation that we are talking about since several years.
And what about you, Noah? Where would you like to see greater collaboration across the industry?
So I think the panelists touched on a lot of good points. The one I would add is underserved markets, emerging markets in particular, rural, remote areas, really that digital inclusion. So we need to be able to partner with each other to serve those areas. And in order to collectively grow as a global society, we can't forget about those that we leave behind, right? And in terms of bringing new talent into the industry, there's a lot of talent in those areas that is very innovative, and they're contributing to the tech side. Certainly, they have a hunger and a desire and a ton of kind of energy that they're bringing to the industry, and so it's really important that we provide that connectivity. And so whether that's partnering with the LEO satellite operators, Telstra is very active in that environment with ground stations and things like that, or whether that's traditionally through rural broadband or bringing fiber to the home. All of those things we have to be focused on to kind of bring everybody in the future together.
What about you, Martin? Where do you think we should be collaborating, or where can we be more effective?
2 things: cost sharing, and that's through network sharing. There's inefficient allocation of capital at the moment in the industry at a national level, to a lesser extent at an international level. And secondly, educating politicians to create a better environment to invest properly. And that is currently, in my view, a hindrance. I see a question here. How confident are you in recovering the investments made in 5G? Not very. I would not be an investor in 5G at the moment. Partially because the use cases are not really there. Partially the barriers that the various regulatory bodies set to deploy a 5G network are pretty high. To get a decent return on investment, I think we can put our money elsewhere. So sharing investments, sort of more efficient allocation of capital, and influencing people who set the policies at a national and international level.
Right.
So can I, Annabelle, no, can I add, because I will be very sorry for all the operators investing so much money on 5G. I mean, Martin is destroying them, so let me say something positive, Martin. I mean, otherwise, all the licenses that has been paid and all the investment and so I have to.
Yeah, you have
so
to.
I think that there are things that 5G needs, so we are not yet there. But the mobile edge cloud, the private network, I know that are not just use cases, but Web3, metaverse, these are massive use cases. We need to understand how the topology of the network will change in order really to serve these new use cases. But the low latency use cases is what really is coming new with 5G. So we need to work in order to make this investment work, Martin, and we need your support as well.
Oh, no. Look, that's partially, in order to make this work, is a better allocation of capital. It doesn't make sense that in Italy there are 3 mobile operators at the moment, all rolling out a 5G network with rent sharing is absolutely crucial to get a decent return on that investment. And that's what I meant with a better collaboration at a national and international level. And 5G, look, the use cases are absolutely compelling. I only think they're 5, 6, 7, 8 years out before they really come to life. With the ultra low latency or the ultra high bandwidth, there's just not that much need for it. And 4G and LTE can cover a lot of the mass-to-mass communications use cases today. Look, it's a timing matter. And those taxes that the politicians put on it to pay for spectrum auctions are not helping to get good returns on those investments.
So let's round off this discussion, because we're coming to the end, and I apologize for that last question that's just come in. But let's get back to our sense of positivity, like where we started at the beginning of this session. So we know, as an industry, we have played a major role in keeping the world connected. And as you say, there are some amazing things coming down the chain. 5G is going to enable, the next step for us as humans and societies in delivering a purpose. But what about you as leaders, right? I'm so lucky to have such high caliber panelists here today. What would you like your legacy to be? What is the thing that you would like to leave behind and say, I did that? Martin, let's start with you and go down the line.
Look, it's to contribute to that collaboration. I see Mark has just joined us. I think you asked this question perhaps even. He's one of the big drivers behind the standardization of the interoperability of telcos. And he's doing an outstanding job, and he's leaving a little bit of legacy supported by people here on this panel. And we need to continue down that road and make it easier to collaborate. And I hope that, say, in 10 years' time, people look back and say, okay, me as an individual has made a very, very small contribution to that.
Yeah, and thank you, Mark, for the question. It's about that. It's not even yours. It's having contributed. First, what we have done during COVID as an industry, maintaining that connectivity 24/7 in the whole world. That was really something I think we will keep in our heart and memories for life. And 2, going forward, to contribute, each of us, with our little stone, to making this ubiquitous global carrier of the world that everybody needs in 4G, 5G, and more G to come.
Elizabeth.
So it's openness and collaboration. And it's very much so. The question that is on the screen here is one way, because there are the industry standards. So we need to leverage on some of these entities or associations that helping us to standardize things. Even if we can, start with the standard de facto, like we were speaking yesterday, and then being standardized, because we need to be fast. We need to do things fast. Okay, Mark, we all thought that you were writing the question, but in any case. And so I think openness and collaboration, because each one of us cannot be a global operators. We need the others. So it's better then we open up and start to understand how to collaborate at the best in order to make this great global ubiquitous network.
And Noah, retirement's a little bit further away for you, but what would you like your legacy to be?
Yeah, I'll round it out with a little bit of a different perspective. Certainly, in a globally connected society, the possibilities are infinite, right? And it feels like we can do anything. But I don't know if this message is adequately conveyed to the next generation. So what I would love to do is to be able to walk into a job fair at a university, in X amount of years, and have that enthusiasm for when they see a telco operator, an ICT firm, that people are lined up to talk to that booth, lined up to apply for a job there. I mean, we need to fundamentally change the way that we're viewed, but in order to do that, we have to modernize, right? And so that's really what's important to me as we look forward.
Perfect. So that brings us to time. I'd like to thank all of our amazing panelists for taking your time to talk to us today. And for those in your audience, thank you too.
Thank you, everyone. That was a really great session. We've got our last keynote panel starting in just under 5 minutes, which is going to be a great one, looking at innovation and automation. So please hang around or come back in a minute. Thank you, everyone.
Remember, we do it for the young generation. Say it again. Thanks to you.
Yeah.